World building in movies has the ability to truly immerse the audience into a story and adventure that awaits them. We're going to discuss movies that have great world building and how it enhances the quality of each film. Now, I've decided to split it into two categories, which are movies with source material and movies without any. I personally find world building more impressive if there is no source material, because then they have to kind of come up with everything themselves. But it is still extremely impressive to adapt something from a book, show, video game, whatever it is. However, crafting worlds rich in history with unique tales really brings life into a fictional world that often brings audiences wanting to come back. Meaning franchises can continue creating media within this world that they've created. And with each film that I'll be talking about, there will be no spoilers. With that being said, let's talk about movies with source material. And for me personally, the first franchise that comes to mind is the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Particularly before Endgame, there were so many characters and worlds to explore that all connected so well together that it truly felt like a connected world, like there was a reason for each film that came out. The best thing about this franchise is that when something happens in an earlier movie, the consequences are usually seen in a later movie, which really gives an audience a reason to watch every single film that comes out. Between 2008 when the franchise started and 2019 when Endgame was released, they made 22 movies in that time frame. And in my opinion, each film added as another layer of depth to this incredible world. They start to slowly reveal things like characters that may come up in future movies or Infinity Stones that were referenced in movies. Stuff like that really keeps the audience wanting more from this world. Although since Endgame, I feel like the franchise doesn't have a clear goal in mind and a lot of movies just don't make sense and feel like filler.
This is disgusting. This is awful in every way.
Planning what your franchise will be like years ahead can have huge payoff as it allows for excellent world building. A big aspect of world building that kind of started with this franchise is post-credit scenes. They're kind of cringe now, but at the time they worked really well and they really hyped the audience for the next upcoming movie, which is why at the time Marvel was such a huge franchise that made so much money. Now compare this to the DC Extended Universe, which started in 2013 and didn't come up with a second movie until 2016. So there was already a 3-year gap, whereas with Marvel, they made 22 movies in 11 years. So consistency is very important when world building because it keeps the audience intrigued for the next movie, for what's happening next. And DC didn't quite keep up with that. Before Justice League came out, they came out with these movies, which was just only half of the characters that the Justice League had, whereas in Avengers, they covered all of these movies before they took on the assignment of a huge budget team-up movie. They rushed to make that Justice League movie in order to compete with Marvel, and it kind of just backfired. So DC is an example of bad world building in my opinion. Moving on to a franchise that has a seemingly endless world is Transformers. With each movie that comes out, the Decepticons keep referencing what is really out there, saying stuff like, oh, you have no idea what it's really like out there in outer space. Because the movies are so big in scale, movies like Bumblebee I appreciate a lot because they tell a good story from a small point of view. That scene really got me in the cinema. I think it's important for a franchise to cover the smaller stories and the bigger stories. Now moving on to Dune, both part 1 and part 2. Despite 90% of the movie being taken place in one planet, we as an audience feel like there is a whole galaxy out there to explore. Because of how global these events are, like this small war sparks a bigger war, and how the spice is influential not for just this planet but for the entire galaxy. So they kind of effectively make a world whilst only staying on one planet. Within the planet itself, the sandworms are excellent, and how the Fremen live compared to how the others live are also covered in depth. And something very important for world building is history. And the Dune franchise does cover the history of the Fremen pretty well as well, which truly immerses you into this world and you're left with wanting more. When the current world is at stake, then audiences are scared of what will happen to the future. But when you reference the history and how much the future will actually impact everything, then tensions really rise just by explaining the history of the planet. Now these two franchises are the most known for their world building, the first of which being Lord of the Rings. Incredibly well adapted from the books. All the places that they visit feel very unique from one another. I like how there's different monsters with each place they go to. I also like how they explained the history of the rings within the first 10 minutes of the film. Already gives us an idea of what this world is like. Moving on to what is, in my opinion, the best world building from a franchise that is adapted from a book, which is Harry Potter. Hogwarts has so much history, has so much depth, and what I personally really like about this franchise is how they expand from Hogwarts into the outside world. For the most part, these special powers and these wizards are restricted within a certain area, but then when everything goes rogue, seeing the impacts of these powers in the real world is super interesting. The history of so many influential characters are really explored and revealed within each movie, which really makes the franchise stand out from others. Now, moving on to franchises without source material, and I'd like to first talk about Alien movies. Now, Alien movies with good world building include Edge of Tomorrow, District 9, A Quiet Place, and my personal favorite Alien movie, and which also has the best world building in my opinion, is Pacific Rim. I really like how the movie explains so much within the first 5 minutes. Okay, I know what the fuck is going on now, just from this short explanation. The designs of the Jaegers and the Kaijus are so well made and really helped differentiate the battles and the epicness of each fight. A great way that they explain this is through these scientist characters. Their whole job is to figure out how kaijus work, and it's a great way to reveal their secrets and how they inhabit other worlds and so on. Too bad the franchise didn't take off because of how shit that second movie was, man. I really hope somehow this movie takes off again, because I really do love that first movie. Now moving on to a franchise that is a little bit overlooked in world building in my opinion, which is actually John Wick. The first film is very simple, they don't really tackle world building all that much. But from the second movie onwards, particularly because of the High Table, we realize wow, there's a huge world out there. And the High Table is in all of these countries that John Wick goes to. John Wick's history is never explicitly explained. However, so many people within the movies have stories about him and who he was in the past. So that keeps audiences interested in what John has done. Small details like how the High Table has their own currency and how there's a conflict between the influential people is super engaging and just adds more layers to the world of John Wick. Now, this is a franchise that fully expands their world by the end of the first film, which is How to Train Your Dragon. I talked about it a little bit in my trilogy video, but by the end of the first film, they now have dragons. Before, they could only use boats to travel, so the audience is left with, oh wow, they have all this potential now, I would like to see what they find. And so the second and third film, and even the show, they really explore all these islands, these different types of dragons. I am super into the geography of this world because I want to know what dragon does what, which ones counter a specific dragon, which ones are friendly, which ones are not. The dragon aspect I find very interesting, but even the islands themselves, it reminds me of Subnautica, where you just cannot wait to find out what you find next. Before I wrote the script for this video, I actually didn't consider this movie very highly in regards to their world building, but after thinking about it, it actually does have some really good world building, which is my personal favorite movie, Inception. The film finds time to explore how this technology impacts the real world, which is when this guy says this quote.
They come to be woken up. The dream has become the reality.
Beyond the real world, the dream worlds themselves are very excellently crafted. I love the restrictions of all the dream worlds and how you can't do this, you can't do that, and yet there still feels like there's infinite potential as to how a world can come out. Moving on though to what everyone knew was going to be number one, it is going to be Star Wars. What makes this even more impressive is that they had no source material, they had no books to adapt, they had no show, and yet the world is so rich. There are lightsabers, the Force, the different types of ships, the different character designs, so many different aspects that combine for such a rich history. This list isn't ranked, by the way, I just wanted to talk about it, but if I had to give a number one, it would definitely be Star Wars. You know a franchise has good world building when there are a bajillion toys and Lego, just because of how well designed the characters are. However, one thing I will say is that the prequels, and especially the sequels, make the overall story make less sense. But overall, this franchise is great world building. I've always been a pretty big fan of world building, and similar to soundtracks, I think world building just enhances the quality and makes the movies more memorable. I wanted to make this video as high standard as my last video, but I'm literally leaving to the airport in less than 12 hours. I'm going to be on holidays for 2 weeks, my first time going on holidays by myself, so excited for that. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you guys for my last video. The comments were super nice. Literally every single comment was really nice, and it's motivated me to do more videos. So once I come back from this holiday, I'm gonna grind again and get all these videos out because I'm genuinely really loving it. Let me know what movies you guys think have good world building. I'm very interested. I'm sure there's loads of franchises and movies that I left out. Alright, I should probably get some sleep, so I'll see you guys in my next video, which will be after my holiday. And I hope you guys have a good night. See ya.